Welcome on my first step ever. I'm so excited that in every episode we get to invite such amazing human beings across the globe who have taken that step, that scary step of creating a life of their own. And how did they build that is the conviction that they have created on their own journey, in their own actions that they have taken. But does that come easy? And if it doesn't, then what really it takes for them to still be consistent and take those scary small steps to reach their first big step. And today, to uncover that journey, to help you and me learn a bit more about how we can build conviction on our own journey, believe in ourselves, and take those actions, whether we see the outcome in the near future or not, but to be able to appreciate our journey and know that my journey and your journey is unique to us. So please join me in welcoming one really amazing, beautiful, vivacious, and one amazing soul on this podcast today, all the way from Adelaide, Australia, Nicole Zink. Nicole, welcome on my first step ever.
Thanks so much, Ashani. Thank you for having me here. I really am looking forward to chatting more with you and getting to know each other. Yeah, it's a really wonderful topic to talk about, setting off on that first step. And yeah, I've got a few of those experiences in my life to share and dip into that experience. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing it firstly, because I think it's sometimes it's kind of challenging to kind of dig deep into our past journey and kind of really sit down and reflect what went right, what went wrong. But when we are able to kind of share such experiences and in the most upfront, honest way, I think it really helps other people who are somewhere stuck, who may not have that kind of a support, mentorship, or inspiration from anywhere else. And if they just happen to be here today and be able to kind of hear your journey, they might be able to get that push, a little bit of a help from what we discussed today. Now, before I begin us and kind of shoot my first question towards you, I'm going to give a bit of a sneak peek about you to our listeners today.
Okay.
So this week I'm joined by the incredible Nicole Zink, a multidimensional creative wellness mentor and entrepreneur who's mastered the art of reinvention. Wow, we would really love to learn that, given the kind of fast-paced environment that we are in. I think that art of reinvention is what we all need to kind of have a bit of it, at least knowledge of. So with over 12 years in tourism and nearly a decade in the wellness industry, Nicole is now writing an exciting new chapter. She's the founder with Zinky, a digital marketing startup helping wellness practitioners grow with clarity and confidence. And as if that wasn't inspiring enough, she's also making waves in the world of commercial modeling, aligning with the brands that celebrate authenticity and creativity. She does look amazingly beautiful just on the virtual screen.
Thank you,
And
Shani.
I think, and I believe more than along with your, out kind of physical appearance and the beauty that we see, I believe that you have a beautiful soul. With just a minute or two brief interaction between us just before we began, I could just feel that, and I can't wait to unleash that, uncover that in the episode going forward. So in this episode, Nicole will be opening up about the navigating her changed challenges, backing herself in business, and stepping into the life she truly desires with courage, clarity, and heart. If you're ready for a dose of inspiration and the permission to start fresh, this one is for you. So hit that subscribe button either on Spotify or on YouTube, wherever you are watching or listening to this today. And let's get started. So, Nicole, thank you first of all for being here. I always start with the very, very important question, which is please take us through your childhood days. Also, what was the mindset of the people that you were surrounded with?
I was born here in Adelaide, and I'm the only one in my family that was born here in Adelaide. My mother is from the Philippines and my father is from Germany, and so all of my mum's family is in the Philippines, and my father is only one of three siblings, and I have an auntie here in Queensland, but the family was all quite spread out, so there wasn't really a lot of family and close people for us growing up. It was, just pretty much me, my mum, and my brother majority of the time. Dad was always there too up until about the age of 8. And so, yeah, childhood, whilst there are some like beautiful memories, was also very challenging. It was confusing at times. It was very difficult for my parents, having both immigrated here to this country. English was both of their second languages. And then I was growing up in a culture that was separate to theirs. You know, around that time in South Australia and growing up in an Asian household, there was also a lot of racial kind of challenges in community as well, which we definitely felt the effect of, and my mum and my brother more so, which I didn't really fully come to understand until I was an adult. So to sum it up, I would say that it was challenging. You know, my parents split when I was quite young and lived separately, even though I still got to see my dad quite often. And on occasion, we would still go on like little camping trips and things like this out in nature. Those were probably my favorite times to like be out in nature. And, you know, dad was the one that was working most of the time. So when I did get to see him, it was playtime, whereas mum did all the nitty gritty and was there every day and, you know, took care of us, made sure we had food on the table and all of these things. So my relationship with mum was somewhat always quite difficult, and I, yeah, it was difficult growing up with a single mother in a foreign country and in a culture that was separate to the one my mother knew. Yeah, there was a lot of fear and anxiety that came from my mother, which wasn't aligned with my current reality at the time. So it was very confusing. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite a lot to kind of take in, sink in,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of interplay of different emotions, different characters at very
Mm,
different timelines. I think which your mother have might have been in, you might have been in, and your brother and your father as well. Like, I think that is
yeah.
very challenging. You know, when kind of people who are with you, your family, who are bringing you up, they come from a certain different kind of
Mm,
an upbringing, and you are being born in a society which has a very different kind of an upbringing. That's definitely a challenge, a tussle, a conflict in within yourself itself. You know that am I doing something wrong, or why are they not kind of being the way that other people are being in around my surrounding, and that leads to a lot of confusion,
mm,
a lot of agitation, frustration. So given that you had that kind of sort of a challenge kind of growing up straight up with the kind of environment that you were growing in, how do you, when you look back today, how do you think that shaped you in the next coming year, or your teenage years, because that is something that's very troublesome.
yeah, I mean, I have lived several lifetimes in my years, and you know, I stayed in Adelaide up until I was 16 years old, and there was a moment where things weren't great at home, and I left all of a sudden quite abruptly. Left halfway through year 11, which is the final year of school here in Adelaide, and I went
Wow.
from Adelaide to Sydney and ended up living with my father for 2 years. And then from the age of 18, lived out of home and moved into my first share house and have lived on my own pretty much ever since. So it definitely, I think at that young age, without the right support and without the, you know, emotional support and having someone to model you how to regulate your emotions and to process things and to have real guidance was very tricky. And so it set me up to be quite an independent person. And I've been on my own journey for a really long time. And although sometimes you don't really know what it is you need, sometimes you know what it is that you don't need. And so, in some way, shape, or form, I kind of knew that the environment I was in wasn't the best for me, and I knew I needed to leave. And although I didn't make the choice when I finally left at 16, at some point in the months following that, I had to decide whether I was going to come back or not, and I decided not to. So I just felt at that point that I had more opportunity where I was, even though I had no idea where I was going. Yeah.
I think that would relate to so many people listening
Mm,
to us today, watching us, because we definitely live in the times where most of us have done enough. We have done whatever we were kind of told, we were, taught, or we were advised on. Most of us, we have done that, or we are on the path of doing that. And still we feel that, we don't know where we are going. We don't know
mm,
what we are doing. Is it enough? And I'm not sure how you took it back then, but I think it also comes from the point of you looking at what's happening around in your society, or around people, that what they're doing. It
mm,
often becomes a game of comparison by the end of everything. Oh, that's what people are doing, or that's what's working for them. I have done this enough as well. Why isn't it working for me? I think at the end of the day, sometimes some days you do feel that way. Some days you kind of look inwards and see that, oh no, you have done everything that you can 100%. So what's going wrong? What can we do? And that's the confusing state that most of us find ourselves in this very tender age. So
yeah.
while you were there around 16 and 18, and when you had to make this, or you were sort of in a way forced to make this decision, given you were in that situation, are you able to take us through what was going in your mind and heart, and how did you process that
Mm.
situation at that point in time?
There was a lot going on for me in that time, and I really wasn't okay, to be very honest. And I mean, just to paint a little bit more of a picture, we were family that had immigrated here. We didn't have family around. We had friends outside of school. Um, and the way I explain it to friends now is I kind of grew up around the whole wrong side of Adelaide. I grew up around the people that were caught up in like the not so great things, like around drugs, around there were people fighting all the time. There were a lot of like racial fights and things like this. I would get approached at the shopping centre, people hanging around people that were involved in criminal activity and things like this. So it wasn't, for me at that time, because you're little and you don't know anything outside of the world that you currently exist in, it becomes normalized. And so you, I guess during that time, I thought I had all these amazing friends. The more people I knew, the better. And I thought all of these people I knew were people that were close to me. And in fact, they weren't. They were just a bunch of people that I knew. And so, yeah, it was definitely confusing. There were things that happened to me in my youth that, that weren't so great, that set me on a path that I struggled a lot with mental health and trauma. I have a history of complex trauma from all of these different experiences. Um, and it was just difficult. It was challenging. And there was a time in my youth and in my teens where I did try to take my life. So it was, it was hard. It was very hard. And it wasn't until years later, once I decided not to go back to that environment, I had then the opportunity to see a different way of living. And albeit I grew up in housing commission here in Adelaide, and my mother still lives in that housing commission house, which thankfully was a house in a regular area. It wasn't in and amongst a whole community of that. But when I moved to Sydney, the situation I found myself in Sydney was also housing commission, but it was amongst a whole suburb of that. And so I went initially from one situation to another where I would sit up at night and witness things out of my window that I didn't want to be witnessing it. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I would cry to my father and beg him to like take us out of there, which he eventually did. So I was really grateful for that, and that he listened and he knew that it wasn't the place. And from then onwards, things kind of started to get better and things improved. And I was able to continue my studies, and I was able to get into the courses that I wanted to study, find my way back on a path again. And I think for me during that time, like the thing that really helped me the most was diving into creative work and art. Like art was always my favorite subject in school, and so that was the way I expressed myself. I have always been a writer, always journaled. I wrote poetry, and yeah, I would find myself in my new school in Sydney, hiding out in the art room, just hanging out with my art teacher and just put all of my pain and my suffering and everything into this journal, this art journal that I had at that time, which eventually I lost that art journal in the later years from moving house to house after that. And yeah, that kind of broke my heart when, when I lost that because there was so much in it. But, you know, looking back now, I kind of think, oh, perhaps, you know, I wasn't supposed to carry that all around with me. It was time to let that go as well. So, you know, wherever that is, I hope someone else is enjoying it because I don't need it anymore. But yeah, so that, yeah, I think art really is the thing that kind of saved me, and good friends that I met throughout my studies and my secondary studies after high school.
Wow, Nicole, firstly, thank you so much for sharing that, opening up with us. I think
Mm,
it's not very easy to kind of open up about the most challenging times of your life, especially. And I think this was quite, must have been very, very heartbreaking for you at
mm,
many incidences. And probably that affects a lot of us as well. I think people who are listening to us, the ones who may have been in the same boat or maybe they're experiencing the same thing. I would just like to draw the attention to the fact that Nicole was once in that shoes, but today she is building her own life and she's doing very well. So please hang in there if you have any sort of, you know, difficult thoughts. Please hang in there. Give yourself some time. Delay your decisions which do not favor you, and probably reach out for help. And this is what I want to kind of, highlight how beautifully you have shared that how you helped yourself come out of that situation. Given that you were going through very pressing and traumatizing situations, I think, but it was you yourself at one point, I think, that said to your father, I want to get out of this, with all the fear, I don't know, with all the courage, whatever, saw that in yourself, that, it's enough, I want to change my situation. And that is so powerful, coming from a place where you are so disappointed, you're so disheartened, you're traumatized, you are in a very difficult mental space, and yet being able to come out and say that this is enough, I want to change my situation. I think that one brave step in that difficult time probably helped you first seek for help. So people who are listening us, please seek for help.
yes, definitely.
Voice it out, say it. Yes.
Yeah.
And another beautiful thing, I think Nicole shared that how her healing process began, which is writing down her thoughts. But if writing is not your thing, probably, I really, really recommend, creativity, because inherently humans are, made up of creative mind, and that's how our energy flows. So if you want to have a shift of the mindset or the mental state that you're in, creativity really helps. Any art form, anything that helps you release your thoughts from your head to
Mm,
either on a paper or in a dance form or in music or drawing, all these things helps you release those negative thoughts from your mind and from your body eventually, slowly.
mm,
So I really like the fact that you took us through the spectrum of how things were, how bad it had become, but there was a
mm,
point where you made that courageous move of just saying, help me, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to get out of this. And
yeah.
then slowly your journey began. And your amazing journal, I think it all works in perfect way. Probably whatever you had let out, it was time for that chapter to maybe left behind and for you to start a really beautiful life.
Yeah,
Maybe that's why
absolutely.
it's not with you now.
I was just going to say, I definitely agree with that. I like to try and find meaning in all the little moments, even if it doesn't make sense initially. Usually, when I reflect back, I find deeper meaning. You know, I was very although I was hurting a lot and I didn't know or have the right support around me, there was a part of me that was very open, like I didn't hold back in my journals and I didn't hold back in what I was putting on the piece of paper. It was just, like you said, it was just a way of letting it out and letting it process out of me, that I didn't have to hold it inside internally. I would have exploded. It was too much. And so I did have, a handful of friends that I would talk to openly about all these things as well. And that's always helpful. But really, for a lot of it, I definitely felt alone a lot. It's hard to believe now, and especially with new friends and new community that I have in my life, when I tell them, I was quite an angry child. I was very frustrated, very holding a lot of emotion, that people go, they don't make that connection. But not everyone really knows about some of those things in my past. And even now, when I share it, I just share an overview of it and have left out many different details. And it's not necessary to continue going into the stories of it all. I think once you do find a way to process it and find that right support, there is always a way to land back on your feet, and there is always help out there. There is, like you said, it is really important to reach out and to find someone that you can open up to. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think this is the beauty of, sharing your stories and also listening to people's journey, because you realize that even the most toughest of the times can be overcome by showing a little bit of sign of courage. But courage doesn't look like, that doesn't look like courage when you're actually doing it, because that becomes a necessity. That's like this comes from within, that
Yeah, it
that's
does.
it. And yeah, although that you need help, but the first help comes from within by saying I need help.
Mm.
So that's very interesting to see, Nicole, that. And I even, yeah, I mean, I think if people don't know your formative days, I think if they meet you now, they will definitely not be able to associate with the frustrated child, because I think you've done a great job with yourself to kind of work on yourself. You are calm, you're peaceful, you glowing into wellness. You have your own startups that you're kind of working on. Talking about being who you are today, there has been a lot of effort that I'm sure you have put to be where you're today. And we would love to kind of, delve a bit more on that journey, because I think that is what's going to help a lot of our listeners also understand that how can, when they have taken the first step of coming out of that situation, they have asked for help. After that, what really is involved to kind of work on themselves. So how did it all start for you?
Great question. I'm like, where do I start? There's, one thing I want to add in as well is that, during that period, one thing I knew I wanted to do, which was influenced by my auntie in the Philippines. It's my mum's younger sister. She's no longer with us, unfortunately, but she was an interior designer, and she was the one person that I looked up to and that I had a relationship with, albeit she lived across the oceans and she wasn't someone that was always in my immediate life. But she inspired me to be an architect, and that was something I wanted to do at that point in my life. And so, despite all of my current circumstances, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Having a wild dream or an ambition or a goal was something that has continued to pull me back in. I always had this North Star. And at that point, I wanted to be an architect. But also, one of my wild childhood dreams was that I wanted to own an island in the Philippines, because there's over 7,000 of them, which meant one of them was going to be mine. I was always on this mission of don't ever stop chasing your dreams. And so despite all the things that went on
Love
in
that.
those teen years, once I got to Sydney, I wanted to pursue architecture, but it became now a bit of problem solving, because the curriculum in South Australia and New South Wales is different, and I would have needed to repeat a year to get back on track with my grades. And coming from the background of being a little bit of a nerd in school, I refused to think that I needed to repeat a year. So I decided to take a different pathway, and I went into TAFE, which is like a secondary study here, which was a pathway to get into university for architecture. And so at that point in my life, that's what I knew I needed to do. I came back to those goals that I had, and I continued to find a way to problem solve and to find a solution that would allow me to continue walking back on the path towards that. You know, I think having goals and ambitions is something that was driven into me by my auntie, yes, but also by my dad. And, you know, although, yes, I pursued architecture, I didn't graduate at uni, but I completed part of the pathway and started working in the industry in my earlier years. And eventually there was another roadblock, which was when my auntie passed away when I was about 20 years old. She was 40 and I was 20. And I never made the connection back then, but after that had happened, at some point I just threw everything up in the air and went, I don't want to do this anymore. And now reflecting back, the timing of it all, I'm like, well, that makes sense, because it was painful to, you know, grieving her loss and then still pursuing the thing that she inspired me to do. So I ended up leaving that journey, and I decided to get into the travel industry and tourism. And so, you know, within mind, I still want to, you know, have an island in the Philippines one day. I just always kept moving forward.
I'm sure.
That, you know, I've settled on just having like a small block of land on an island. That's okay. But
That's big.
yeah, just a small parcel of land. I haven't got there yet, but I'm working on it. And anyway, you know, so I then went into the tourism industry, and I was I was always, when I was studying, I was also doing some other kind of second job or working on my own project. I was very driven. I was very focused. I was always learning. I just loved the process of learning. And anything that was going to help me build the skills to achieve what my goal was, that would always pull me back into that. And also anything that I could do that would allow me to have experiences in life that I knew I wanted to have, that I didn't have the finances to, you know, to just go and do them freely. So rather than paying to have experiences, I would go and work. You know, for instance, when I was 18, I started doing promotions and working in the cloakroom at nightclubs because I wanted to go and party for free. And then I got into the travel industry, and was really fortunate to do a lot of travel in lots of different corners of the world for very cheap or for free at times. So that opened up a lot for me as well. You know, 12 years in the tourism space, I always say that I have three great passions in life, and one of them is not tourism as such, but travel, creativity, art, and wellness. And tourism and travel was one of my biggest teachers, because when you travel and you go somewhere onto the other side of the world or into a new place, you don't have anybody to rely on but yourself. Sure, you meet people along the way and you find new connections, but at the end of the day, you really have to trust what is going on inside of you and in your gut to really know whether you're in the right place or not. And if something feels shifty or it doesn't feel right, you get out of there really quick. But otherwise, you just listen to that kind of inner knowing, and that sets you always on the right path. So, yeah, you know, I think to get to where I am now, it has always been listening to that inner guidance, always understanding, you know, even if it doesn't fully make sense, somewhere along the way, it will always lead me back on the right path. That I'll always land on my feet, so long as I really like trust and honor that, and find a way to speak up about it or to make the changes necessary to solve whatever the problem is in front of me to keep on moving forward.
I think that made me think a lot about my journey as well while you were, sharing yours. And when you brought forth this fact that sometimes timing is so important about certain things and you may not understand
Mm,
at that point in time, but they definitely happen in your life to be able to either push you forward or help you realize something, or help you kind of reflect inward and see whether you are actually heading the right way or not. And it's
mm,
very important to then sit back and understand and maybe act on them as soon as, I wouldn't say, you have to rush into something, but if you have had some sort of realizations and that's what your intuition is kind of also pointing towards, it is best to take an action towards it. And there's a lot that you mentioned over there. Yeah, I think given that you mentioned the three things that you love and you were able to kind of, do two of those things at that point in time, which is being creative and traveling through your tourism job that you had for those many years. And I suppose the wellness kind of, was interwoven in that journey. But before we move on to that wellness journey and about your digital marketing startup
mm,
very recently, in those 12 years, because you were traveling a lot, and we hear a lot of people saying, that travel changes you in many good ways or many ways. In your personal experience, if you can draw out a few of your top three, maybe a few learnings that you can share with us, that what it really helped you uh, in terms of, in your about yourself or in your life, how it
mm.
really kind of changed you for good.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that, I mean, already I came from a place of being exposed to different cultures, but whilst traveling and having the opportunity to experience even more cultures outside of the three I already knew was very eye opening. You know, we all might look a little bit different, or we might eat slightly different foods, or, but at the end of the day, we're all human and we all have emotions and we all need to eat and we all need to sleep and we all need community. And, throughout my travels, my travels were my biggest teacher. I learned the simplicities of life, like to really appreciate the simplicity of life. It isn't all about the sparkly, shiny things or just going to a destination just for taking all the beautiful pictures on the beach, but to really get to know the culture there and the community and how people live in that place, what their life is like, what their challenges are like. When you can really start to understand different cultures, you can learn a lot about the world, about humanity, about yourself. And these things are really, foundational and fundamental for life. I think it's, I've always been interested in like psychology and human behavior and just understanding why it is we do the things that we do. And at the end of the day, it's that
Absolutely.
we all connect back to nature and we're driven by nature because we are natural beings as well. So this is probably my biggest takeaways from travel.
That's quite interesting, Nicole. And before we just move on to your upcoming venture and get to know more about your first steps towards that venture, I just wanted to ask a really quick question over here for those who may not be in the position to travel a lot, or may not be able to, or still are working towards it,
Hmm.
and may be able to reach that phase in a couple of years. If there's something that you can help them understand, that even if they're not able to travel, but what is that thing that they can probably be aware of or they need to kind of be aware of in order to live a better life?
At some point in my 20s, I had this realization that whenever I was away on a trip, that I wasn't the same person as I was when I was just living my life and going through work and the mundane tasks. of everyday living. And at that point, and when I had that realization, I promised myself to always live every day of my life as if I was traveling. And I think this is really important because even if you can't afford to fly somewhere or drive somewhere more than 50 kilometers away, there are new places right there in your home city or where you are living now that you've never seen before, and that probably a lot of people in your area have not even bothered to go and explore. Go and explore in your hometown. Get to know who the traditional owners of the lands are from where you live now. Get to know what that place was before you even existed. Immerse yourself in the culture of where you are, because it's so easy to just get stuck in the day to day in the rat race and I've got to do this and I've got to do that and forget to live. I think it's really important that we need to keep on living every day. Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you brought that up, Nicole. And I put that in such beautiful words because I think there are two reasons that people may travel. The first one is to actually go and take really good pictures, have good memories, and that you have seen the world. For that, you may. I'm not sure if that would be able to if that really happens for everyone, because then for that you may need to be at certain places to be able to take like really good pictures. But if your purpose of travel is to really learn about more people, learn about culture, or learn about more about yourself, discovering about yourself, if that is your goal, then that can actually be done in your own city as well, or next to your city as well. It's
Yeah.
just a start.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I would like to tell my listeners, there's nothing that you're missing out on. The
Mm.
only thing that you will be missing out on, if you have never really sat with yourself, never really known yourself enough, that is the key to, I think, everything. Because when you know yourself, when you know about your strengths, your maybe weaknesses, or where you can improve, or what you really are wanting to achieve in life, or what sort of a life you want, when you are aware of all these things, then you start working towards a life that you really want, and things start flowing in. But if you're
Mhm.
not aware of who you really are and what you really want, and that's a process, then your mind is kind of probably placing its focus on things that other people, or maybe the external, the society is kind of telling you, and their version of
Mhm.
life. So that's very interesting what travel does to you, and
Yeah.
travel can mean anywhere. So don't restrict yourself. Moving on from this topic, where
Yeah.
you've gained so much out of our experience in tourism, wellness. How did this wellness startup kind of come about? Please take us through your digital marketing with Zinky startup journey and what's next
Yeah.
for you.
So, I mean, this is also another really long story, so I'll try and keep it somewhat short because I know we're running out of time. But um, so after about 10 years in travel, I was living in Sydney. I'd been in Sydney for 14 years now. I'd traveled a lot internationally. My job at the time, I was working for a marine tourism company. My job was to take clients out to destination out in the Fiji Islands and in the Whitsunday Islands. I didn't have an office. I worked from home. I went to visit clients and it was amazing. And there wasn't really like that was at that point, that was my dream job in the industry and I'd achieved it. And partly there was this idea of like, okay, well, what is next? And I didn't really know what that was yet. I knew at some point I was kind of sick of drinking all the time because I was wining and dining clients and we were running incentives and drinking cocktails on the islands. And I was like, I don't know if anyone knows the travel industry, there's a lot of wining and dining and schmoozing and learning about products and destinations. It was taking its toll on me and I didn't know what was next until one day I was sitting
Mm.
on the sofa at home and I was scrolling through Facebook after work one day, and my brother here in Adelaide had posted an ultrasound of his partner's belly, and they were having a baby girl, and they just announced it. And in that moment, I had this really sure gut feeling and message that came through, and it said that I needed to go back to Adelaide. So I kind of sat with that for a little bit.
Wow.
and was like, okay, it took me about 6 months all in all to really decide that that was what I was going to do. And when I finally made that decision, I made that decision and I had the courage to make that step because of my community in the travel industry. We have, friends all up and down the East Coast, and we all, worked quite closely together. We all traveled. When you engage in that kind of work with each other, you get to know each other like on a more personal level as well. So we had a lot of beautiful community in the travel industry. And I went to this one last function at Taronga Zoo in Sydney, and it was a dress up party. And I walked in, and when I walked in, my nickname is Zinky, hence my business name with Zinky. And everyone was like, hey, Zinky this and Zinky that and this and that. Anyway, it was in that moment that I kind of knew, like, I love you guys so much, and it doesn't matter if I leave. If things don't work out, I can come back. And I know that these friendships are real and that this community is always going to be here, even if we're far away from each other. And so that gave me the courage to kind of make that step. I ended up resigning from my job. I packed up my life. I sold a lot of my things. I ended up coming back to Adelaide twice. That's a story for another time. And there are so many other little bits to this story that have so many little synchronicities that presented themselves along the way that always showed me sometimes at really pertinent moments that I was on the right path and that I should just keep on going, even if it was hard. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up back here in Adelaide. And when I arrived back here in Adelaide and wasn't sure what I was going to do next, it was at that time that I decided to really reflect on what are my deepest passions in life. Like, what is it that I love and that I really enjoy and thrive doing? And that's when I came up with those three things: the travel, the wellness, and the creativity. And since I ticked the travel box, I decided to enroll in a yoga teacher training and enroll in a Bachelor of Visual Arts at the same time, and pursued both of those for 6 months and then decided to stick with the wellness. So I did the yoga teacher training and then I continued on into doing remedial massage therapy, and as a remedial massage therapist started my own business, and then have been doing that for about the last 5 years. And whilst I had become a practitioner, I continued my studies. I did Reiki, I did craniosacral therapy. What else did I do? Went into a little bit of shamanism and a few different areas. And along the way, as a practitioner, I'd always get this, "Hey Zinky, could you help me with my social media?" Or, "Hey Zinky, could you help me with my website?" Or, "Hey Zinky, I'm trying to do this thing, but I can't figure it out. Can you help me out?" And so I ended up being this person as a practitioner that had these extra skills from my past lifetime, working with so many different systems across all the different jobs. From architecture, we learned, all the different drawing systems. I did a bit of graphic design then as well. And then in the travel industry, we learned all the different GDS systems, booking systems. We changed software and I would help rewrite the training manuals and all these kind of things. So when it came to systems and it came to the digital space, it was just something that I was good at. And so people would come to me for advice. So eventually, towards the back end of COVID, business as a practitioner started to get a little bit more challenging, and I started to pick up a little bit more of the digital work again. And at some point decided, oh, I'm going to actually make something out of this. And I was kind of doing everything all at once for a while, and it was a lot.
Wow.
But it was also very difficult to let go of the practitioner work because it's very personal, and throughout my journey and all the things that I had that were difficult in my childhood, through my own healing journey and understanding what it would take to process those things, to move them somatically out of my body and heal and move forward in my life, it gave me the ability to hold the space for others to process some of the same things out. And I've been on some tremendous, wonderful journeys with some of my clients that were with me for 3.5, 4 years. And how do I tell them that hey guys, I think I'm going to change career now. It was really difficult. It was really difficult. At some point, you just don't know when to pull back. Last year, I actually had a car accident, and then that became the catalyst for me to really like just put down all of the wellness stuff. And I'll be seeing my last few clients this week, and I'll be teaching my last yoga class this week before all of the wellness activity finishes and I go full time into the digital marketing stuff and pursuing a career in modeling. Yeah. That's the short version.
Wow, Nicole, I think when you I think when you said that you've lived different lifetimes in this lifetime, I get it now.
Yeah.
You have really gone there, gone with the flow, worked your way through things, learned, did what really presented in front of you along your way, and you've really given yourself a lot, and you've not shied back from moving on from things to the next thing, even if it might have taken a bit of a time when it first occurred to you. But this is the whole I think I would if there's one takeaway from this entire journey that you have shared, for me personally, is that don't get stuck to one role or one version of yourself. If you are being allowed to grow by the universe or whoever you kind of believe in, if you are being presented by that opportunity, if people see something more in you, if you're able to provide, be open to kind of at least try that out and kind of expand, evolve. And that's what I think life is all about. And I think you have such great stories and experiences to share, and I can't really wait to see what your next chapter brings, because you do look amazing in those photos. I'm sure you're going to do very
Thank
good
you.
work as a commercial model. And with the digital startup, as you said, that you already have demand for that, which is I think a great way to kind of start any business.
Mhm.
So thank you so much, Nicole, for being on this podcast. I would have loved to kind of delve deep more about a few more things that I probably wanted to, but I really feel very happy that we were able to kind of, catch up just for the podcast. Also, even before that, along with a lot of people who are watching us today or listening to you, I'd like to kind of say thank you for being on this podcast. And I always request our guest speakers to leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that they really resonate with.
I feel like there's only one quote at the moment that is really suiting to this present moment, and it is, I think it's by Lao Tzu, that when you walk on the way will appear. Yeah, just keep moving forward. Yeah.
Well, that is definitely needed for me, for sure, the phase of the life I am in now. So I'm glad that you were here, and thank you so much for letting us peep into your life and be able to get some learning, some understandings that
Mm,
how having conviction in yourself, and even at times when you may not have a lot of belief in yourself, but trusting your gut feeling, going with the flow, giving yourself chances and evolving is so important. Asking for help is so important.
mm.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for being on my first step ever.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Shani. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. And I would like to tell my listeners that I always say that start believing in yourself and keep believing in yourself. Please do give ratings and please do write your comments. And you can directly reach out to me on my first step ever _IN. That's my Instagram handle. A little about myself. I have always loved performing on stage, acting, speaking, and just emoting myself. So I use these mediums different ways so that I can connect with people, help them, empower them, infotain them, which is to inform them and entertain them. If you would like to collaborate for any opportunities, more than welcome to connect with me on my Instagram handle. Thank you.